Welcome everyone to one of the series together with Frans-Willem from Ecochain. Today we're going to speak about supplier engagement programs and lifecycle assessments. Frans-Willem, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm Frans-Willem de Kloet. I'm the CEO of Ecochain, and Ecochain provides software to calculate the environmental footprint of products, so-called LCAs, lifecycle assessments. And we do that since 2011, based in Amsterdam, but we serve customers all over the world.
Yeah, we've been working already for years now. What do you see now in the last 12 years, I think, from Ecochain, the biggest challenge that you see that is an important one in LCAs?
The biggest challenge probably is that the landscape is changing a lot. I think a lot of this work started, at least if you look in the Netherlands, in construction materials. That's where the starting point of these developments, and now it's really spreading out to a lot of other industries. And the challenge is to agree on certain standards. So one is to get the data, which is very complex with 100%. Data collection and modeling and everything. So the LCA itself is complex, but it's also the complexity also comes from the fact that it's just what kind of language do you talk then? How do you compare apples with apples? And that created a lot of difficulties.
But I can imagine as well what I hear in the market with many of our clients is to understand what an LCA really englobes, right? Data collection, getting the right data points or getting the right methodology in place. Yeah. There's still a lot of confusion you see in the market around that space.
Yeah, because it is a new market, and if you go into the new market, then everybody is trying to find its own language, basically. Yeah. So there are a lot of initiatives of talking, what should be the outcome. Yeah. I think the good news is that industries or that companies have agreed that LCA, life cycle assessment, is the standard, right? Yeah. Is the methodology to calculate it. Yeah. And then based on that methodology, there can be different outcomes, different language, different interpretations. That is the complexity of it. Yeah. That is the good news. So basically at the end, as a supplier or as a company and you have products and you want to calculate the impact of products, you can rely on a life cycle assessment. The complexity comes then in the how do you translate that and how do you talk to each other in these data points.
And what would you say again? During our collaboration, we come across a lot of different frameworks as well around the LCA space. We know that the LCA is the framework, but there are of course a lot of other initiatives around the LCA part. One of them being PACT. Yeah. What's your experience with PACT and how you've been twisting that and how you've been working with that?
Now, PACT is a initiative and it's a good initiative and it's a big initiative because there's a lot of companies behind it, right? Yeah. A lot of industries worldwide have adapted this framework. Yeah. So that's the good news. One of the challenges, let me put it that way, of getting product data is that you need to get data from your suppliers, right? A product often consists of materials you buy or supplies you buy from your suppliers, and what you need to establish is a language on how the supplier is going to provide you the data, right? Having standards and having a common agreement on how that should look like is very important. Also because always these suppliers are not only supplying to you, they're also supplying to a lot of others, right? And if they have to provide the data in a slightly different variation or a different language, it becomes very quickly a very difficult thing to manage. Yeah. So all initiatives in that direction are very good, and if that is a big initiative like PACT, where there's a lot of industry behind it, it's very valuable. Yeah,
I think one of the common denominators was of course our project with Unilever, which of course was an enormous success and we've been running for the last 3 years. Yeah. Maybe it's a nice moment to ask, for example, Stella, before I ask you a little more question in deep from asking Stella, how was your experience with PACT and also why did you, Stella, start, of course, the program with Unilever? Stella is a senior manager from business operations in sustainability at Unilever, who will give a quick insight on that.
Hi, Marc. Thanks for having me here. Hi, Frans-Willem. Good to see you both, and thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'm going to come to your two questions in a moment, Marc, but just first for your viewers, just a bit of context of who I am. I'm Stella. I work at Unilever. My role is purely focused on our supplier climate program, and I sit within the procurement organization at Unilever, which I'll come to in a moment. It's an important point for engaging with suppliers on this topic. So I'm going to address your second question first, Marc, if that's all right, which was why did we start engaging with suppliers on climate? And the short answer is really, we have 2 science-based targets to 2030 as a company, and with very, very steep reductions. And when we look at the data to see, well, where do most emissions arise? Well, most of them arise from the raw materials and packaging materials that we buy. And so it became very clear early on in the program, 4 or 5 years ago, that we absolutely have to engage with suppliers in a meaningful way on this topic. And it was at that point that this program was designed. We've learned a lot on the journey, and I'm just going to share a few highlights here around, what has really helped. The first is knowing who to partner with. And here I mean which suppliers are the most important from a climate point of view or a greenhouse gas emissions point of view. Secondly, we recognized early on we cannot do this alone. We simply did not have the capacity in-house to support suppliers that needed the support, and some really did. Of course, we've got some that really don't. They really know what they're doing, and it's about them just getting on with it. But we definitely have 2 groups of suppliers where they needed the support, and this comes to my third point. We selected Nexio Projects and Ecochain to work with one of these 2 groups, and in particular to help these suppliers develop LCA or product carbon footprint capabilities that we needed. So that's the second point: is select your partners carefully, and there are many out there, but we did a very robust market scan in our selection. It's very important that you select partners that can really do what you need and what your suppliers need, and this is what we found with Ecochain and Nexio Projects. And then thirdly, I think what's been a big unlock is actually supporting suppliers. So this partnership with these 2 organizations was a form of support for suppliers to help them to meet our ask, which they did see as stretching. Your other question, Marc, was around our experience of PACT. And to answer this, I want to go back a few years, because 5 years ago, if I'd said the word PACT or the acronym PACT to suppliers, most would have just looked at me with blank faces, I believe, and most did. And so the journey that PACT and the industry has been on over the last few years is really quite phenomenal. It's now a very well-known brand and methodology. And what it's unlocking for us in Unilever is very important on our decarbonization journey. And that's the following. We are able to ask suppliers to share with us PACT compliant product carbon footprint data, and they share it with us now. We received nearly 700 of these data sets last year, and we then act on the data with our procurement team. And that means engaging with suppliers around, okay, thank you for the data. Where do most emissions arise, and what are your plans to address those emissions? Those are the kinds of conversation that these data are unlocking. And being able to do this in a standardized way across portfolios and across suppliers is where we can work at scale. So this is where PACT has really been a big enabler for us to work at scale on this topic. So I would just to summarize or conclude, I think if I look back 4 or 5 years ago, I think what's most important actually is to just get going. Once we got going, we learned so much on the way, from the mistakes that we made, from the feedback that we got from suppliers, from the advice and the experience from the partners that we selected. We learned so much. And so if there was just one piece of advice I would give to anyone that has not started this journey, it's really just start, and you will learn so much on the way. Thanks, and back to you.
Thank you, Stella, for the great insights live, and Frans-Willem, directly to you. How does that resonate, these key challenges that Stella just explained, and also from where she, of course, with Unilever came from to start the program 3 years ago? Yeah. How has the challenges been from a digital perspective, from your perspective?
Now, what you see is that scope free, or in difficult terms, scope free, upstream scope free. So do I get the data from my suppliers is a very, very important topic for these kind of companies, right? For Unilever and the likes. And that is I think a recognized challenge. And I also see now that maybe in the beginning it was a sort of an estimation of what that impact could be from the suppliers. Sometimes they asked for maybe their company footprint or what is the impact of your supplier. But ultimately, of course, you don't buy a supplier, you buy products from your supplier, and therefore you need product data. And that is a huge challenge because a lot of these suppliers don't have it. And so what you want to do is you want to create a scalable program, a supplier engagement program, to get that data from the suppliers. And I would say what Unilever does very well is that they also acknowledge that that data is part of the suppliers. It's still from the supplier, so that the supplier can also use that data for other customers. And then you get this ecosystem collaboration, which is critical to make that work.
I think what was the great learning as well with Stella and with her team was that at first, of course, we had a supply engagement program designed a bit differently than now. And I think that we see that the generations now and the companies are way more into LMS systems, way more into learning and do it in themselves, rather than us teaching them or doing it for them. From your view, if you look above and beyond from LCAs, what do you think for the suppliers? What's the next step for them? They are supplying now one piece of data, of course, to Unilever. Do you foresee that in the future for them, LCAs will be a broader range of?
I think to be honest, this is my general story, but is that I think as a product, as a manufacturer of products, right? I think you have to realize that sooner or later you have to have data on every product you provide, right? And that can take maybe a long time, and it can be because Unilever, kind of companies are asking you for the data, or because your consumers are asking for the data, or because regulation is requiring you to do so, like the digital passport, which is now a big topic. But sooner or later you have to have your whole portfolio available in terms of data and environmental data. So you better start, right? And you don't have to start with your 10,000 or 20,000 or 30,000 whatever products, but you start somewhere. And in that sense, I think what Unilever is doing is a very good initiative, and there are many others now starting. So I realize that this is now happening. And that also your commercial teams will get these questions, right? And that at the end it is an element of doing business. And if you realize that, then I think you need to find partners like us, but others to deal with it.
Yeah, because I think one of the biggest misunderstandings is that people think with LCAs that they immediately need to do thousands of LCAs at the same time, which of course with your toolings is not the case. No. I think the beauty is that you also have two ways of doing the LCA into your tool. Can you say a little bit more about the two options where you see the one from a more company level or a factory level, and one really from a product-centered level perspective?
The top-down, or what we call the top-down, so from a factory level, the big advantage there is that you look at all of your products coming out of a factory, so which we also, in other words, called LCA at scale. So if you need a lot of LCAs, which eventually, potentially is your future, then that is a good way to do that. If you only need a couple of product impact calculations, then you can also look at a bill of materials at the end and basically look at all the impact or the components of a bill of material and the impact of these components, and you can also get to that's a bottom-up calculation. So it depends a bit on the use case or what is best to use. Do you do it more from a reporting perspective or more from an eco-design, right? How do I change the impact of my products kind of understanding? That will determine how to best use it. And so that's why we also offer two ways to look at product impact.
No, why I'm saying this is because in the market you hear a lot that actually people say that an LCA is pretty expensive. Yeah. But actually showing also with your system, it shows that you can do it at scale. It doesn't need to be the 10, 20,000 euros per LCA that you need to pay, but actually you can way lower if you, of course, like you said, produce it at scale. And that's also the part that we've did with Unilever to show how the scale actually.
Yeah, that's the effective, because I think again, if you look at the supplier engagement program, doing it in group, you don't have to do it one-on-one, basically, right? You can, a lot of the education around how to do this and how to work this out, you can do in group, right? Yeah. What is a product carbon footprint? What is an LCA? You can do it on group, right? Yeah. You don't need to do that one-on-one. Yeah. So you can you create a lot of efficiency by doing that in that way. Yeah.
If I would be a supplier, Frans-Willem, what would you say to me? I'm a supplier, I'm just starting, I don't know where to start. What would be your tip for me to, where should I get started and how?
I would say just start, right? And don't make it too... It is a complex topic, I realize that, I think we all realize that, but don't let the complexity stand in the way of ultimately start, right? Because it's also an area where you can just start. Maybe it's not correct yet, or maybe, you know, but you can start and start to learn what this is and see the fun of it, and also the possibilities and the opportunities as a company to deal with it. Because at the end, it's also a business opportunity, in my view.
Because on the business opportunity, you see also in the market that is changing. Commercially, a lot of companies are requesting in tenders, or of course commercially, are requesting these LCAs. So it's not only from do it, spend money to get insights for your suppliers or for your clients, but it's also from your future for your business. Becoming future-proof means as well performing an LCA.
Absolutely. You know, there are a lot of tender processes already where if you don't provide this data, or if you are scoring less than another company, you're basically out, right? You're out of business. And that's going to happen much more in the future.
And last tip for, if I would be a Unilever and I need to start my supply engagement program, what would be that tip for them? What would be your tip to them to say, this is how you get started? Again, suppliers start small and bridge the complexity. On the other side, for the bigger firms that actually need to set up a supply engagement program?
I think first, what Stella also mentioned is understand the impact in the first place, because I think it starts with the understanding at the top, right, of the organization, that this is a very important element of the total impact, right? That is the first understanding. So, and have also maybe a target in terms of what do you want to achieve then with that number. So that I think is an important one. And then again, I would say again, start small, right? I think understand who are your top 50, 100, 200 suppliers, work with them first, work that out, and from there move on. So because again, if you look at all your suppliers, you maybe look at 10,000 suppliers or whatever, and then it looks like a huge chunk of work, but usually only a small number is actually having the true impact. So understand who has the impact, and work with that group of suppliers, or start there, and work with your suppliers, work with your procurement team, supply chain teams to get that story going.
Super. Frans-Willem, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. Thanks
Stella
for inviting me.
Of course, and Stella, thank you as well for joining us live. On behalf of all of us, we want to thank you for joining. Key takeaways: start small, bridge the complexity, and just get started with a tool and with your suppliers and the collaboration. Again, a big thank you, and see you soon on this supply engagement program that we had today. Thank you.